And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Rocket Arena, Cleveland, Ohio, Michigan State, 71-63 over New Mexico in second round of the NCAA tournament. Michigan State advances to the Sweet 16 for the 16th time in the Tom Izzo era. New Mexico played really well. They brought their A game in the first half, had a 10-point lead at one point. Michigan State showed some poise, withstood it, came back despite Jase Richardson having an off night. Got contributions from others, and once again the wearing down process, a surge in the second half, ends up winning by 8 points. Usually when they get that surge, they win by 15 or 16 against some opponents, but not against New Mexico. New Mexico was good tonight and pushed Michigan State. Michigan State had to dig down to get this one done. Now off to the Sweet 16, Paul Konyndyk.
Yeah, you know, those guards, we watched the Marquette game. You and I watched that as like interested observers the other night. And New Mexico, every time it looked like, David Joplin from Marquette would hit a three or, they'd go up five, New Mexico had to answer. And you could tell by watching those guards, whether it was True Washington or whether it was Donovan Dent, and their big guy, that they're gonna, Junior Joseph, or actually he just goes by Nelly Joseph, but you knew they were gonna have an answer. And that good guard play is what gets you, gives you a chance to make runs in the NCAA tournament. It enables you to stick with teams or stay right there when you need to. So I was impressed with New Mexico. Michigan State kind of beat them at their own game. We talked about transition and all that the other day, and both of us wrote about how important transition offense, transition defense was going to be in this game. And Michigan State had a 17-3 advantage in transition. And to me, that was the difference in the second half. You talk about the wearing down process. I believe Nelly Joseph, 2 of his five fouls were in transition, sprinting back. He got tangled in the wash. There was a couple times where Jeremy Fears was going up court, and he took a dribble and a step to the side because he could feel Joseph coming up behind him, and he wanted Joseph to knock him down and get him in foul trouble. But that transition, it was such a critical deal for Michigan State, but it took time. It took them 11 minutes before they decided to go. Michigan State needed to go small to shut off that one avenue that New Mexico could ride. The advantage of driving onto 4.
They went small after the first TV timeout.
Yeah,
4 minutes into the game.
But it really stuck. And everything started working together. They started getting defensive stops that they needed to get, right around that 11-minute mark. They went on an 8-0 run. They started getting more rebounds. So the defense started sticking. The rebounds started accumulating. And when that happens, then Michigan State can get out and really run and do some good things. And it continued in the second half.
And New Mexico came out strong. Half-court pressure defense, denying the passing lanes, made it hard for Michigan State to get into their offense. In the in-game thread over there at SpartanMag.com, we do an in-game message board thread at the Final Forum, and we'd love to have you become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. $1 for a week of coverage. In the week since Selection Sunday over at SpartanMag.com, we have 38 written content items. If you're a big Michigan State fan, you'd love it. Go check it out. $1, try it for a week, SpartanMag.com. Also, in the meantime, give us a like here in the channel, subscribe to this channel so you can follow us when we have new content here in terms of video. I forgot what I was going to say. But it was something about this basketball game.
Yeah, you're talking about the in-game thread.
Yeah.
And it probably has to do with, I don't know what it has to do with, but.
You can move on to the next thing. We might come up later. But anyway, so it's pressure defense. And in the in-game thread, I mentioned it's the first time really since Maui when they played Memphis that I thought that Michigan State really faced a team that played some in-your-kitchen pressure defense. They're not as long and probably not overall as athletic as Memphis, but that gave Michigan State trouble against Memphis, gave them trouble tonight for a few minutes. 3 or 4 turnovers in the early going. Michigan State was really sped up, had trouble getting good shots early, but it's hard to play that kind of pressure defense for an entire game. So New Mexico was very good early in establishing some intensity and taking Michigan State out of their offense and getting an early lead. However, New Mexico, with head coach Richard Pitino, was also battling a situation where he was keeping an eye on the fuel gauge all night. He made some good timeouts when he saw his team start to get tired because Michigan State's trying to get that war of attrition, make you run back, make you sprint back, wear you down. So on one hand, his team's spending a lot of energy in that half-court defense early in the game, but then he's also trying to keep the fuel gauge managed. So the half-court pressure defense was good early, but it wasn't something they could do for 40 minutes unless you got like 10 guys that could play that hard. It was effective early, but they couldn't keep that up. They played well, but not like they did in the first 5 minutes defensively.
I asked Michigan State guards in the locker room about that, and you know what? That's something that they're not going to give me an honest answer about. I asked them if it took them a minute to adjust to the pressure they were putting on the ball, because it felt like it did to me. But they, each one of those guys, they don't want to admit that, right? So they're saying, well, no, it wasn't a problem. But to a man, each one of those guards felt like, Michigan State was shooting about 30% for much, for maybe the first 10, 11 minutes of that first half. But all the guys at Michigan State that I talked to in the locker room said, well, it wasn't what they were doing on defense. It was, the shots that we were missing, and they felt like they got really good looks.
And they did, not in the first 5 minutes, but later in the first half, definitely Michigan State missing good shots.
Yeah. So but I do feel like the same way you did when I was seeing it in person. I'm like, okay, it takes a little while,
and they're blitzing those ball screens, forcing you out to the hash mark. And Michigan State didn't. A couple times they had slips to the rim, but we mentioned last night or in the pre-tip read that San Diego State was the one team that I thought did a good job handling the blitz and making them pay. Michigan State was trying to get to it, but could never quite get that relay together to really make them pay when they were blitzing on those occasions.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too. Like, I think the older guys, the older guards, as the game kind of went on, they handled it a little bit better. I thought, Jase Richardson was a little bit uncomfortable in this game, and I don't think it was just, he missed some open shots and he did nothing wrong. Okay, but one of the things that I think was difficult for him, was he had to guard Donovan Dent quite a bit in this game, and when it's not easy for a young player, to handle that kind of matchup. It's not easy for an old player to handle that kind of matchup, and then also, be on your game offensively. I was looking at Marquette Stevie Mitchell. He was the primary on Donovan Dent. Stevie Mitchell's a 2,000-point scorer in his college career, and he was like, he shot like three or four for like 20. Or 18 or whatever it was against New Mexico. So sometimes when you're chasing the guy around and you're so focused on defense, that can be a problem. I just think Jase Richardson, he missed a lot of open shots, and his teammates to their credit picked him up. But that's what this team has been doing all season long.
I thought it was Fears and Holloman 90% of the time on Dent, and they did a great job.
Early in the game, I felt like Richardson was on him a little bit.
And Fears did a really good job not only getting into him, but also you saw Fears denying the ball back to him, making him work to get the ball back. So Fears is spending energy to do that, and that was effective. A lot of times they couldn't get it back to him, so they went to Washington, and he ran the offense. There were, I don't know how many, maybe 5 or 10 possessions where that was effective in closing him off. And Dent is a great player, and like we said last night in the VCast prior to this game. We thought the Michigan State's two-headed monster on defense would make it harder for Dent. And in the pre-tip read, I mentioned that it's a good, solid chance Michigan State was going to keep Dent below his averages, his scoring averages, his percentage averages, and even his assist averages. He ends up 14 points, but had to take 18 shots to do it, 7 out of 18. And he, there were a couple times he showed he's a classy scorer with the medium range game, with his medium range game, his ability to finish around the rim. He's excellent. A couple others that he didn't get to go, he was mad at himself on a drive, and when he drove, there was a forest of arms and fists and hands and fingers at him, and they made it hard on him. And a couple times he was upset with himself. Sometimes he thought there should have been a call. But you could see him getting frustrated.
The one thing that I was concerned about for this game is, guys from smaller conference schools like that, as they get used to the tournament, as they get used to playing longer defenders, more physical defenders, they get better and better. And I felt like in some ways he was better in this game than he was against Marquette. He got, Michigan State threw a committee at him, and those guys were playing good defense, but Dent didn't panic as much. He didn't throw the ball away. You didn't see the one-handed crazy passes that we saw consistently in that first game. So he really adapted the way he plays to kind of maximize his ability to impact a game against a team like Michigan State. And I think them beating Marquette really helped him adjust to the style of play he was going to face against Michigan State. So that's a credit to him. But it made him more difficult to contend with for Michigan State, and they answered that test.
All right. As you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting our environment. So help the environment, help yourself, and help the beaches and your lakes and your roads. Take them back. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. It's a message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. I tell you what, Paul, Michigan State got a lot from Frankie Fiddler tonight. on a night when Jase Richardson wasn't playing well, Michigan State had to go small, so they went Cohen Carr at the 4. But Cohen Carr, he plays hard and he sprints the floor and goes hard in defense and hard in rebounding. And it's not like Carr can go ahead and play 35 minutes. So Carr has to sit sometimes too. And Michigan State has found Frankie Fiddler as their power forward when they go small to replace Carr. And at times he's on the court with Carr. Frankie Fiddler has been searching to make good contributions all season. He's had a good attitude all season. Began the season as a starter. And a month ago, he was the 10th man behind Xavier Booker. Now he's coming in. He pitches some important middle relief. And I don't know if they win this game without him. 10 points, a couple big rebounds, blocked shot that one time on a switch. He ended up guarding Dent. Dent's like, I can take this guy. No, he couldn't. He drove. Fiddler stayed on him, blocked the shot. Drive, draw, dish to Akins for, I think, one of the dunks. Fiddler had to have him tonight, and he came up big.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you talk to the Michigan State players. I'm going to write a story about Fiddler in a minute after we get off camera. But you talk to those guys, and I think the area that he's improved the most is defensively. You know, I think he came into the program with a reputation as a scorer. He came from a small conference. He's not used to being challenged as much defensively, and he was able to, at Omaha, to use his defensive IQ, because I think he does have some, and his length to prevent a lot of type of scoring opportunities. But against, you look back at Maui and him playing those games. When you start playing against the North Carolinas or the Memphises or like teams like Michigan State or a lot of Big Ten teams that have good guards, like in Oregon. And they're driving, or Maryland, it's an adjustment. Like, it's tough for those smaller conference players to do that. He's not an elite athlete by any means, and he'd tell you that as well. But he has adjusted his game to suit the program that he's in, and he's accepted the fact that he's a role player and he wants to do anything possible to help out his team. And tonight he came through not only offensively, because he was like 4 for 7, he had 10 points. And the only thing he did wrong was miss free throws. But he had a really,
how many did he miss? At least 2?
He was 2 for 5.
So
he's a guy that's a 90% free throw shooter.
Could have scored 13 tonight. That's what he should have had.
But he was like 4 for 7, and a lot of it stuff was through contact. He was there. He looking to score. You think back to the beginning of his career at Michigan State and some of those early games. He wasn't looking to score on a lot of the stuff he scored on tonight. He was looking to get fouled and looking to go to the free throw line.
Or pass to his new teammates.
Yeah. So in this game, I mean, he played with a purpose. He played with a purpose on both ends of the floor. He embraced his NCAA tournament experience, and I do think he and Cohen Carr together, that combo, they were a catalyst for this victory. Cohen Carr, he did a lot rebounding, he did a lot of good stuff on defense, but Frankie Fiddler, that both ends of the floor, on a night when shots weren't falling, good shots weren't falling, he really bailed Michigan State out in some tough half-court situations. If he doesn't score the way he does, in that second half, Michigan State is maybe going to overtime, or maybe this is a one-possession game down the stretch. And a one-possession game is not something you want against a guy like Donovan Dent, because that's a guy that can carry you. And if this game was within 4 points, then it gets really scary. Michigan State did what they needed to do. I think it's great for him. This is the other night against Bryant, that was his first NCAA tournament experience, so that was a cool deal. It was like a big important moment for him, something that kind of validated his decision to come to Michigan State, beyond winning a conference championship and being part of a team that could hang a conference banner. Just getting to the NCAA tournament, that's special for him. But tonight, he had ownership in this victory, and that's a big deal for him. And it just feels like, for a guy like that, basketball rewards you when you do things that maybe aren't selfish. Mm-hmm. And, he willingly changed who he was as a basketball player. He changed his mindset as a basketball player and embraced a smaller role, and he was rewarded for that tonight. And I feel good for Frankie Fiddler. I feel good for the program moving forward, because there will be other times possibly where Michigan State runs into a 4-man that can drive. That's not something that Jackson Kohler's had much of an issue with this year. And I don't know.
He did this weekend.
He did this weekend, but they're two, Bryant is a different type of team. That's like a guard type deal. And I don't know how much scouting they did on Mustafa, Amzil Mustafa,
they
because
scout everybody.
Well, I know that, I understand that, but I'm not sure how much they factored in that he might be a driver. I watched a few games, and I saw a couple of instances of where he drove, but I was kind of like, is that because they're playing a crappy team, and then there's no help defense, and so this is a really limited prep, but they went right after Jackson Kohler, and then to Jackson Kohler's credit, when he was moved over to the 5, he contributed, and it wasn't easy for him at the 5 because Nelly Joseph is a legit, he isn't a mid-major, type post guy. He's legit. We'll see him on a Nigerian national team maybe someday. He's played 156 games at the collegiate level, defensive player of the year, shot blocker, number 3 rebounder in the country. You can't fake that. And he is every
drop
bit
step on the block.
He's
body control with that Euro step the other night against Marquette.
That was great. And he finishes nicely. He doesn't, he doesn't get sped up. I really like Nelly Joseph, and he's a good teammate. Sets good screens. But Jackson Kohler, I know he's really frustrated with himself tonight, and it was a hard night for him to handle because he wants to prove, and he has for most of the year, that he can handle some of these guys, these athletic fours. But tonight, that is what New Mexico decided to attack, and Michigan State needed the changeup, and that going that small with Cohen Carr and Frankie Fiddler was the reason why Michigan State moved on. If they keep on banging their head against the wall with a big lineup, especially with Carson Cooper in foul trouble in the first half, it's not going to happen. And we talked about Frankie Fiddler being a big impact. I felt like this was one of Shimon Zapala's best games. He gave some really good minutes in relief, and maybe it doesn't all show up in the box score, but he played really firm. I thought he set the tone for the second half, where he had 2 offensive rebounds right on that first possession, got his first bucket that way, and that's demoralizing when that guy's coming out and playing that hard, and he's getting that game tied up the way he did. That's Michigan State basketball right there, and I thought that set the tone for the entire second half.
I felt like he's been jumping better all week. We saw it at the open practice here 3 days ago. They were doing their open gym or the open practice shooting and some dunks and things like that, and I just thought he was jumping better like on Thursday, and his legs were certainly alive on that put back score, which I think tied the game early in the second half. And Zapala's a guy that played 3 minutes against Bryant and did not go back in the game because they had to go small. They stayed small. And he's a guy that played 8 minutes, single-digit minutes a few times coming down the stretch. He's a guy that struggled with ball screen defense against teams, just in terms of knowing, he has the ability to do it. It's like, okay, against this guy in this combination on the side ball screen, we're going to do it this way. At the top, we're going to go through. This side, we're going to jam. This side, we're going to go up and under. There's different ways to do it, and he just wasn't getting that straight. Tonight, Cooper gets 2 fouls. Kohler's struggling. Zapala, you're back in the game. Don't sink. And he didn't. First half, he played maybe the best ball screen defense he's played all year. They were kind of feathering it with him because that's what these guys do, and they do it really well with Dent and Joseph, that high ball screen. Next to what Purdue does, 2-man game ball screen, just straight old-fashioned screen roll. This is as good as Michigan State's seen all year. And you got Zapala out there, sink or swim. It's game 33. Get your crap together. And he put a plug in the drain and he pitched some good middle relief innings. They went to a media timeout, and he stayed on the court, which I can't remember the last time that they went to a media timeout and he stayed in the game. Starting the second half, he starts the second half with Carr. First time all year that Carr and Zapala have started the second half of a game. Had to, and they trusted him, and he was the guy. And Zapala was part of it tonight. Zapala and Fiddler. Izzo said that a big part of what they, when we asked him about his 16th Sweet 16, what that means to him, he thought about it for a while, and he said it means culture, because he got a phone call from Draymond Green that told him don't screw it up. And, Izzo thought it was kind of funny, but that's part of the culture top to bottom. And Fiddler and Zapala, they were entwined and delivered and contributed to that culture tonight.
Yeah, the ball screen defense, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a big part of it. And then the other thing, too, is there is value to having a 7-footer out there with the physicality. I was watching, where we were sitting, Nelly Joseph was listed at 6'10". He's muscular. He's probably more like 6'9", right? So 240, but he's a muscular 240. He had zero problems pushing Jackson Kohler around. He was physical with him, and he didn't have any issues with the rim protection piece. Maybe a little bit more Carson Cooper, but when he was isolated one-on-one on the post with Carson Cooper, he was strong enough and had good enough footwork to move Cooper. He could not move Zapala.
Great point.
And that's a really big deal for them.
We don't have an emergency, do we, Paul? You didn't trip a wire back there, did you?
I'm sorry, I cut the green wire.
Oh man. So, Jay Dankins, what do you have, Paul? Let's see here. 16 points. Jaden Akins, 16 points, 7-11 from the field, 2 of 4 from three-point range. Had a big three-pointer early in the second half, and then that one with a shot clock prayer. Michigan State had some fortunate plays tonight. That shot clock prayer, that Frankie Fiddler fall-away air ball that Richardson put back up and in, that was one of the daggers late in the game. A couple of favorable calls late in the game also. The Richardson 3 free throws that fouled Joseph out. Michigan State had a favorable whistle down the stretch, and Akins had some prayers answered on that shot clock 3. But he's a guy that if he's got to shoot a three-pointer with 1 second on the shot clock, he's got the ability to make that. It's not like you're asking, nothing against Thomas Kelly, but not asking Thomas Kelly to make that shot back in the old days. He's not shot that well this season, but shot clock's at 1, the ball's in his hands. I'm like, well, he's got a good chance to anybody to make this. He made that one. And then Fiddler scored after that 5-point lead. They called timeout. Akins delivered 2 huge three-pointers. Very good on the drive also, with some dunks and some finishes and a really great reverse layup in the first half when things were not going well. Akins, good game for him.
Yeah, and I want to go back to, the shots are big for him, but the drives. Jase Richardson was not good on drives tonight. He struggled. He was off his game. Even, there's even shots like mid-range or driving shots that he normally makes. He was way off on those. The best combination of guards out there for the drives and for attacking, what they do and get downhill was Trey Holloman and Jaden Akins, and those guys did it with purpose. I thought Akins did a great job getting out in transition as well, and I really like the fact that Tom Izzo chewed Akins out for driving into traffic late and not scoring because he would have rather had Jaden Akins take a 3, and I like the fact that Jaden Akins went back at Tom Izzo and said, I'm in the game. This is what I feel, and getting downhill and going to the basket is the best bet. And that's what Tom Izzo probably likes that as well. He likes Jaden Akins to be emotional, have a conviction, and to play with a purpose. You talk about that Jase Richardson, the fortunate on the Fiddler miss. That's a credit to Jase Richardson hustling and going to the rim when he saw that Frankie Fiddler was driving. Instead of hanging his head because things weren't going well as a scorer, he did a play. He made an effort play, and the basketball gods reward effort plays. Jaden Akins, he hits those shots, that 3. That's another effort type thing. A guy that spends that much time in the gym, wants it as bad as he does, plays defense as hard as he did tonight. Basketball guys reward that type of thing.
Think about the New Mexico side of it, though.
Yeah,
they play good defense. Shot clock's down to 1. If they force an air ball and they get a tip in, they play good defense. Shot clock's down to 1. Guy shoots a three-pointer that wasn't part of the offense, and they play good defense. 1 second on the shot clock. Joseph fouls out on a favorable call on a three-pointer. Man, New Mexico State had some tough ones.
There were some other calls. I'm telling you, it was a physical game, but there were some times that things weren't called. There was a New Mexico a transition deal where they scored. But right before that, I think it was maybe a shot clock violation. Jeremy Pierce gets bear hugged, right up in the, while he's trying to pass the ball, and it ends up being a turnover. So there was some kind of weird type deals in this game. But, I think Michigan State, they created their own luck in a way because they did get downhill. They drove, and they weren't settling for jumpers. If you settle for jumpers, you're not going to get favorable calls. And there was some physicality. I think there was some times where, maybe it didn't favor Michigan State, Carson Cooper's deal in the first half, but there were some times where it didn't favor New Mexico. But I think Michigan State's sustained ability to attack, the transition, the rebounding, and when you keep on going after it and you keep on hunting rebounds and you keep on fighting for every loose ball, those are the teams that get calls, and Michigan State played hard enough to get the calls that they got.
They did, and New Mexico played pretty well on the glass too. Rebounds were 34-28. There were a few balls that were up there, rebounds, and they were grabbing some that Bryant wouldn't have gotten. They battled well on the boards. New Mexico played well. You were right a few days ago when you said New Mexico was better than Marquette. I still thought that, when we were watching that game, I'm like, if I'm Michigan State, I'd rather play New Mexico than New Mexico. Then New Mexico came back and won that game. And even though they were playing New Mexico, I still said I'd rather play New Mexico. But after watching this game, no, I would have rather, if I'm Michigan State, I would have rather played Marquette. Not that I would want Michigan State to do it over and prove it again, but New Mexico was every bit as good as their record.
Yeah, I think the difference between those two teams in my mind is, okay, I think overall Marquette has better personnel. But on the flip side, I felt like Marquette was a beat-down team that didn't have all the pieces that they needed to do to make a run in their own conference.
Yeah.
So they were a lot, in my opinion, like Michigan State was last year, without a real post game, where they're relying on guards and stuff to do stuff on the perimeter. And you become that perimeter reliant, and you have that much ball handling going on. And, I think you kind of get worn down. And I felt like Marquette was a worn-down team. I felt like New Mexico winning that conference the way they did. And I think the Mountain West Conference is, what Colorado State did in almost beating Maryland today, that's more evidence that the Mountain West was worthy of 4 bids, if not more. There's some good teams, but the personnel in that conference was really good. But New Mexico has different pieces. And also the face-up 4. We didn't see a lot of damage from those guys, against Marquette. But
talking about
Amsel, and then the other perimeter guy, the Borovichinen or whatever. We didn't see a ton of that against Marquette,
no.
But you knew he was one of those guys. Like I equated him to the guy from Oregon, who the 4-man that transferred from Stanford that averages 10 points a game. He can do it in some games. He might not do it at all in one game, but if he gets hot, then you're in trouble.
Exactly.
And I felt like if someone played above their ceiling,
mm-hmm.
like Amsel Mustafa did today,
mm-hmm.
and you've got Dent and Joseph, then all of a sudden you're really in trouble because that team that's 3 really good pieces, and then you got True Washington as a complementary player, and he's physical, plays some good defense, can drive. That big guy coming off the bench. There's not too many small teams that have him like a Aloysius Anaganye type big guy coming off the bench. He's a muscular guy.
He jumps well too.
Yeah, he does, and that was not what I would consider a mid-major.
And he only played like 6 minutes a game, but he did well this weekend for them.
Yeah, and I was kind of like Jake Liskow and I, our colleague Jake Liskow and I, when we were watching Marquette, we're like, okay, this guy looks, he looked part of the all-airport team.
Transfer from BYU. And for only 6 minutes a game, that guy can play. And Ansel, number 22, the power forward. In the pre-tip read, I mentioned that Dent is good, Joseph is good, but those satellite players are just kind of so-so. The threes that they attempt, most of those guys are like 30%, 29%, 31%. Not really great three-point shooters, not really good three-point shooters. They attempt them because you need that spacing. That's part of what they do. But I said if they had like just a Joey Hauser to go with Dent and Joseph, then you're talking about a top 10 team. Well, tonight, 22 played a little bit like Joey Hauser. Hit a couple three-pointers in the first half, did some things. They got that from him. That's part of their A game. But Michigan State did a good enough job on Dent to not give him his A game. And then Joseph was good but got in foul trouble. And it all ended up to being an 8-point win for Michigan State. But it was a test.
And it's not dissimilar to what Michigan State, like when I saw the Amsel going off in the first half, having 10 points in the first half, and he finished with 12. So Michigan State really shut the water off there. But it's not dissimilar to what we saw, with Kansas State. When Michigan State lost in the Sweet 16 2 years ago. Kansas State had complementary players. I mean, they had a tremendous point guard, and they had a couple other guys that were really good. But the thing that really hurt Michigan State in that game was complementary players playing above what they played before, and you've got guys hitting shots from 10 foot behind the three-point line. But that was what I would,
That's what you need to move on, man.
And I couldn't help but feel that today a little bit when he was like scorching them. Now, I knew that once Michigan State went small at the 4, I thought, okay, maybe this can stop at least the driving aspect of it. But even then, you saw him hit a contested 3. And then it's like, oh, crap, because you don't want to give a guy like that confidence. A guy that's a 31% shooter, once he sees some stuff go in, then he's feeling really good about himself. And New Mexico was feeling good about themselves.
All right, in these second-round games, we've covered enough. Michigan State runs in NCAA tournaments. It's no stranger to see a tough second-round game. I mean, you go back to 2009. Did they play Kansas in the second round at Lucas Oil Stadium? Was that a second-round game? And then they moved on to the Sweet 16? Maybe that was Sweet 16 to get to the Elite 8 to play Louisville. I don't know. But second round in the national championship year in 2000, they played Utah, and I think Utah was leading at halftime. A very good Rick Majerus team back when Utah really had it going on. That was a second-round game. Michigan State battled. That was here in Cleveland. Second round, tough games, no stranger to some of these runs Michigan State has had. And, of course, They've lost in the second round a couple times to Syracuse and a few others. But
One of the
second round,
one of the toughest second round games Michigan State's ever played since I've been covering was the St. Louis game, another Rick Majerus game. You know, when they played a St. Louis team, Draymond Green didn't have many buckets the entire game, and then he hits a three late in the game to help them win that. But Rick Majerus was very upfront afterwards, saying that he felt that was a St. Louis team that beat a good Memphis team to get for the right to face Michigan State. And Rick Majerus said afterwards that he's devastated because he thought that team was good enough to get to the Final Four.
St. Louis was.
Yeah.
And Michigan State beat him that one. Second round can be tough sometimes, just because New Mexico's a Mountain West team that you might not see on television a lot. That was a real basketball game tonight. Rick Pitino was here watching his son coach. I remember something Rick Pitino said a long time ago when he was head coach at Kentucky, when they played a good Iowa team that was coached by Dr. Tom Davis at the time, that had, I think the point guard was Woolridge, might have been Andre Woolridge, and Kentucky was great. They were like top 4 in the country, number 1 seed type of team. It's Pitino, prime, Kentucky. And Iowa gave them everything they could handle. Woolridge probably scored high 20s, and the score was probably something like 92-88 or something like that. Iowa lost, but Pitino came to the microphone after the game and said that was a regional final type of game. Iowa is a good team. Now, I'm not saying Michigan State's as good as Kentucky was then. I'm not saying New Mexico's as good as Iowa was then. But second round tests like this, they happen in the tournament. Michigan State got one today. Michigan State had a rough game from Richardson, didn't shoot well as a team in the early going, and managed to pull through with other people stepping up and helping forward the ship one more weekend. Next Friday, going to be playing in Atlanta against Mississippi, and Mississippi won comfortably against a beleaguered Iowa State team. That's going to be interesting. I think it's Michigan and Michigan State against Mississippi and Auburn. It's Michigan and Michigan State against 2 SEC teams in Atlanta. So that's something we've never seen before, and I'm not exactly. We'll be scouting Mississippi this week to see whether this is going to be one of those games where Michigan State has to go small again, or if they're going to need to go big. If they play Michigan again, that's a team you're happy that you've got enough bigs, because some opponents you need to have those 2 bigs. Some opponents you need to be able to go small and put Konyndyk in there and do damage that way. So Michigan State's and goes on to the next round, and it'll be another 4-team tournament in Atlanta. Auburn has looked pretty good. They may have peaked 4 weeks ago. We'll see if they can withstand it down there. It's going to be some good basketball down there. We'll see what happens. Anything else, Paul?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because there are a lot of Michigan State fans in Atlanta. You know, like we all know people that live in Atlanta. They're Michigan State fans. It's a fairly straightforward flight. You know, a lot of flights going in and out of Atlanta. But it's also.
Do you know if it's in the dome or the arena?
I'm not sure.
We got a fumble.
No, not really. It's attached. But the other thing is it's a homecoming for Konyndyk, and that's kind of a cool deal. You know, he's from Atlanta, and Tom Izzo was kind of, on their way to the press conference. He's pumping up Konyndyk about, hey, you get a chance to go back home, and everyone's excited to go home and, play in Konyndy's backyard. I do think, like Iowa State, I know they're beleaguered and whatnot, and it probably would have been easier for Michigan State to play Iowa State. That said, I think the fact that Tom Izzo and his staff have experience going up against Beard from when he was at Texas Tech, I think that both teams are going to have experience, but Michigan State will be prepared, for what Ole Miss does.
And Ole Miss will be prepared for Michigan State when Beard gets a week off. Very good defensive coach.
Exactly, but I like the fact that Michigan State's got a veteran team, and when that can take coaching and they can translate coaching and put it into practice on the floor. And I think, Jase Richardson's going to come. He's going to bounce back strong. He's not the kind of kid that struggles. Akins and Holloman as veteran guards. We haven't even talked about Trey Holloman. He had a heck of a weekend. He hit some big shots and he's played great defense.
14 points, 2 out of 5 from 3. The 3-point threat from him is so welcome coming off the bench.
And he hit some huge. You go back in there, they show the highlights from the Bryant game. Before Michigan State took the court, and like some of those threes he hit against Bryant were tough threes. One was like way like NBA 3, and another one was like really contested.
When he's open, you think it's going in.
Yeah, and the thing he's done a really good job of, and what he's getting better and better at as he has more opportunities to drive to the basket, he's getting better and better at the mid-range jumper, but he's also getting better at finishing around the rim. That one driving layup he had to start the game was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, and it kind of gets glossed over because New Mexico had a 10-point lead and they really did damage early, but he basically gets a layup off the top of the backboard.
Oh.
It almost touches the backboard, and it was like, like he knew it was going in. It wasn't like a what Izzo would call a Chrysler. It was a weird shot, but it was like a Tyson Walker type of
Well,
deal. And that, to me, you don't even attempt that crap unless you have supreme confidence. And he is playing with supreme confidence. And you can see it in his eyes when he's not defending. You can see it in the huddles when he is talking to his teammates. You can see it when he's being a leader, picking Jase Richardson up when he needs it. Trey Holloman is really coming into his own. Throughout the course of the season, he's been big in a lot of games. He's easy to overlook, but he is really becoming a dynamic individual, a dynamic leader, and a spark plug for this team. And they need that from him. The one thing that I want to be careful of if I'm Michigan State is Jeremy Pierce is also, high energy, dynamic type leader, but he was on the edge of getting some technical fouls tonight for being overly exuberant, and he's really got to dial that in. When Nelly Joseph was about ready to go out of the game with the fifth foul, Jeremy Pierce was waving, like,
Really?
putting the five fingers up for fouls. You know what? This officiating crew didn't nail him for that. But there are going to be others. And if I was out there and I see a guy holding up five fingers and he's looking at the other bench, that you call me no fun, but there's a lot of people out there that wouldn't want that. And I love the way Jeremy Pierce plays. I love the emotion that he plays with, but he has to be careful because even if there's no intent with some of his exuberance, sometimes that stuff will cost you, and you don't want a good kid, costing his team in a critical scenario and kind of negating what they've accomplished. We saw Trey Holloman get a technical with a moment of exuberance in the Big Ten tournament. We don't want to see the last thing you want is for a good kid that plays hard and plays the right way to get labeled as for certain types of behavior, and that's something that you really got to play on the edge with your emotions and use them to your benefit, but you can't show up opponents. And Michigan State's got to be careful of that because Jeremy Pierce has always had that issue.
Yeah, Izzo said exactly that. I talked to Izzo after the two press conferences, and he said that he was trying to reel Fears in a couple times for the reason you said after Holloman got that technical foul in the Big Ten tournament. And an interesting exchange went on there. That's what Izzo was talking about in the outside the locker room interview when he said that Fears responded to him, "Hey, coach, I want to win this game more than you do." And Izzo's like, first time he's ever heard that before. And Izzo's like, "You might tie me on that. Tie goes to the runner." But Izzo gave him a little slack there, but still wanted to get the message that
Colin Carr's the one. Colin Carr's the one was the one that went out and retrieved Fears. Okay, so it wasn't an assistant coach. When you've got a teammate going out there and be like, pulling your teammate back, and I give Colin Carr's a great kid too, a good personality, but I give him credit for doing that. That shows leadership on his part. But when you got a teammate going out there, and he has to take more than a few steps to go do it, that tells you that you're maybe on the edge of going a little bit too far.
All right, all done. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Cleveland, Ohio Rocket Arena with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.